Good evening. How you all doing tonight? Unbelievable. All right. It really is good to be here and to be around all the winners from all the people in the Southwest region. And of course, it's a privilege that I get to introduce my dad tonight. You know, you all are positive, and I love being around winners, and I love being around positive people. My youngest son is 10 years old now, and his name is Jonathan. He came home from school the other day, and he said, Dad, I think I flunked that spelling test. I said, Jonathan, couldn't you be a little more positive than that? He said, Dad, I'm positive I flunked that spelling test. At any rate, we do have a few people coming back in, and I want them to hear this introduction. I'd like to take advantage of this forum where we have about 600 people out here, and I want to thank Don Van Leeuwen for allowing me to introduce my father tonight. And I like to say, while I have such a wonderful audience, how much I really, truly love having Margaret and Sandy as my mom and dad. They're great parents and they're great people. And I'd like to take advantage of the opportunity to say that publicly. You know, J.V. Sanders, affectionately known to all of us as Sandy, began his career with Rainbow as a dealer in Owensboro, Kentucky. He joined the elite Colonel's Club with 40 sales to his credit the second month that he got into the business. And he has a whole list of accomplishments, and I'm going to quickly enumerate a few of them. You know, I stayed out of Rainbow for many, many years on account of Sandy's accomplishments, and I remember reading Rex events, and I said, Dad, how can I come into Rainbow? It says here you sold 79 rainbows in just 1 month. And he said, Steve, don't worry about that. He said, that was a misprint in Rex events. I said, well, how many did you sell? He said, 78. True story. He had 18 Colonel's Club qualifications to his credit, with 20 more to come, and his best month as a dealer was 78 personal sales. Now, Sandy became sales supervisor in Louisville, Kentucky in 1948, and he had over 300 personal sales in 1949 while serving as a manager. And in 1950, J.V. Sanders became what we now call RGD in Richmond, Virginia. Within 1 year, Richmond was selling 600 sales per month. The Richmond branch sold over 1,300 rainbows under the leadership of J.V. Sanders in just 1 month, and that is a feat that was not accomplished, again, until the advent of the Total program just a few years ago. He became Southeastern Regional Sales Manager in 1953, and his region was first in the nation 9 out of 10 months. He became the National Sales Manager in 1954. The first Sanders month was inaugurated in 1956, and in 1957, J.V. Sanders became Vice President in charge of sales. He became President of the Rexair Corporation in May of 1958. In February of 1959, J.V. Sanders purchased Rexair Incorporated, and some years later, after Rexair had grown many, many times over under his direction, J.V. Sanders, in order to gain unlimited financial support for research and development, sold Rexair Incorporated, and as you know, it is now a subsidiary of Hansen Incorporated. And that gives you just a brief outline of Sandy's career. Now, in introducing my dad tonight, I thought long and hard about a good subject or a way to introduce him. And 2 weeks ago was Father's Day, and it occurred to me that Sandy is not only my dad, but has been the father of Rainbow for many, many years. And I know he's been a father to all of us. And in the 43 years that I've been on the planet, I've had to share them quite a few times with all of you. But his love has been so encompassing that he's certainly had enough for all of us. I would like to bring Sandy up by reading you all a poem about fathers, and it's entitled Our Home. He built this house, the home we love, the walls so strong, the roof above. And he filled this home with love divine, and through his power, he makes it shine. He built this home for you and me, for friends to call so they could see and linger in the tranquil place and join us in a world of grace. He built this home that doubt and fear would leave no mark, nor inroad here. He filled this home with works of art to lift us heavenward from the start. He built this home, and though we travel far, is still the sweetest home by far. For living there, proud of his realm, is the builder guiding at the helm. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to present to you the chairman of the board of Rexair Incorporated and the patriarch of the entire worldwide Rainbow family, my dad, J.V. Sanders. Love you, Jim. I hope so. All right, cut it off. Let them sing, let them sing. Let them sing. Okay. We got the words up there. Oh, okay. Make music all the day. Young folks roll on the little cabin floor, all merry, all happy and bright. And my heart knocking at the door, my old Kentucky home. Good night. Thank you, thank you. Quit. No more, my ladies. Oh, weep no more. We will sing one song for my old Kentucky home, for my old Kentucky home, far away. Oh no! And the coon on the meadow, the shore, they sing no more by the glimmer of the moon. On my old Kentucky home, good night. Now we're going to do one more stanza. We will cry like a shadow of our hearts, with sorrow where all was delight. Time has come when the people have to part, then my old Kentucky home, good night. Oh, weep no more, my ladies. Oh, weep no more. Hey, we'll sing one song for my old Kentucky home, for the old Kentucky home. Away. Oh, please quit. That's enough. Sit down now. Let's get with it. All right. Ho, ho, ho. Very good. Okay. Boy, that's enough to worry you out before we ever get started here, isn't it? Good Lord. Ooh.
I never sang that much of that song in my life, although I love it dearly. I want to express my appreciations to Steve for doing such a good job, Steve. You really are super. And I'm sure if my mama was here, she would agree with everything you said. However, if your mother was here, she would alter that a bit. You know, she's not quite as enthused about all of that as you are, Steve. The one thing Steve forgot to tell you was what CEO means. And there may be a few people in the room who know what that definition is. But just to get us off on the right track, it means clean the executive offices. You know, if I'd have known I was going to have that job when they promoted me from president, I doubt if I'd ever taken it. But I do want to say again to Steve that last night I had dinner. I hate to admit this in front of God and everybody, but I had dinner with my most favorite RGD, Steve. Okay, I hope all of you can understand and appreciate that and not give him any grief. You know, all good fathers are the most severe critics of their children, and particularly their sons. And I play that role with Steve. I've given him a lot of grief in his life, only because I wanted to see him do well. And sons are like prophets. They are appreciated in every country save their own. The one that never gives them enough credit is a guy that ought to, which is me. So, Steve, I want to say to you publicly here that I'm really, really very proud of you, Steve. You have come a long way, old buddy, and your progress is excellent. I will have to warn everyone in the room about the election that we had, you know, because Steve was to visit me in Detroit not too long ago, and I went to the restroom, and when I got back, he was sitting in my chair. So you better be careful how you treat him down here, I can tell you. I'm not kidding, but anyway, I want to express my appreciations, Don, to you and to everyone here for honoring me by asking me to come to this convention. I'm here because of my affection for Don Van Leeuwen and Bunny and all the other key people and their spouses and our girlfriends as well as the dealers. One thing that I know, and Don and I talked about it, and that is that all of the good people in this region are not here. And that grieves me just a little because of all of the good things that have happened here. And I want to admit to you, although I'm sure all of you are tired, and I am too, because being with people as long as you have been wears you out. You know, and every once in a while you get the feeling that you'd like to lock yourself in the bathroom for an hour or two and just be real quiet for a little while. I know what that's like. But I want you to know that my being here is not work for me, and that is an absolute sincere statement. As I heard Tony Anderson say one time in a meeting that I attended here, that I cannot believe that I get paid for doing this. You know, I really, really do mean that. Being with you all, I really ought to back up and give them the money back because I get a lot more out of this than you do. I want to give Don a particular pat on the back and Bunny and Darla for all of the work that they have done here. And because I have been involved in more than one meeting like this, I understand, as few other people do, Don, the infinite detail and work that goes into making one of these things come off as well as this one has. There may have been mistake and error here, but I can tell you I never have seen it. I never caught it. You know, whatever it was, you all covered up pretty good. And they worked very hard to achieve excellence, and you surely did that. I will tell you, and I will say this at the next Pacesetter meeting where all the other regionals can hear it, this is the best regional meeting I have ever been to in my life. That's a fact. Okay? I know that Darla has put a lot of effort into this, and I want you to come up here just a minute, honey. Okay? I got a little surprise present, Darla, for you, hon. here's a $100 bill
Oh, gosh.
that I made in my basement, so be careful where you spend it, okay? Now, I'll tell you a fact, that's only a small token, Darla, of my admiration for the effort that you put in here. I would give you $500, but I would never in this world explain that to Margaret. Good girl you are. We love you.
Thank you.
Super. Super girl. Be careful now. Okay. Very, very good. In looking at what's happened in the meeting again, Don, I was reminded of a little rhyme that I learned many years ago, and I'm sure all of you remember it, about the old lady who lived in a shoe that had so many kids, she didn't know what to do. Now, that's not the rhyme that I wanted to tell you about, but it was one that made me remember the one that I think is an example of Don, okay? Because there was another old lady that lived in a shoe, and she didn't have any kids at all. She must have known what to do. Now, anyway, Don Van Leeuwen, I'm sure everybody in this room would agree, knows what to do, okay? And I will advise you with all the gusto that I can muster that anytime he tries to help you do something, you listen to him. He is, without question, one of the best promoters and organizers of any man I have ever seen in all of my many years, and I respect him for that. The other thing that many of you would not notice, but I do, and that is that Don Van Leeuwen gets all of you involved in what goes on. He doesn't try to hog the stage. He knows that you all enjoy playing the game much more than you do watching. And so I respect him for that. Steve and I, as I said to you earlier, had dinner last night, and we were talking, Don, about how fortunate Steve is and was when he wound up under your tutelage. And if he hadn't have come here, I would have been worried about him. But we both agreed that being assigned to you was a break in his life. And I want you to know how much I appreciate what you've done, even though I realize it required the patience of Job. I'm only kidding, Steve. I want to also express my appreciation and respect to Bunny. All of you know that Bunny works behind the scenes. She doesn't make a whole lot of noise about what she does. She does a good job, and she does it quietly. She's told me, since I've been here, that Don Van Leeuwen continues to lie to the Internal Revenue every year because he puts his name down as head of the household. Is that right, Bunny, or not? And she said that isn't true. I don't know whether you noticed that Don is walking with a wee bit of a limp. He's had trouble with his left knee. Bunny found a blonde on it. Anyway, I'm only kidding. Bobby Dodd, who is Rexair's, what's that guy's name? Don Rickles. I was with him last weekend, and he was telling me that when we were at Doral Country Club in the last Paysetter meeting, that he and Betty were sitting out around the pool talking to Bunny. And Bunny told Betty and Bobby Dodd that Don Van Leeuwen had given new meaning to casual sex. She yawns a lot. Now, the devil didn't make me do that, Don. It was Bobby Dodd, so you get after him when you get out there. I'm serious, if I may be, Don, that you are, in my opinion, Exhibit A of what happens when you have the right key man. And that is that the doors of result get opened. And you have a track record here to prove that. And I want to say to everyone here that I am personally proud to have such a good man and such a good friend. Let's give this guy a round of applause. Very good, Don. Very, very good. Okay. All right. That's enough. Let's don't ruin him now. He'd be asking for a raise if you all do that too long. This has been a great and wonderful convention, as I'm sure we would all agree. And I have been learning ever since I set foot in this room. Night before last, listening to Paul Harvey was a pure joy. He's quite a guy. And I will tell you the truth. I have had some serious trepidations about the news media. If there was ever a thing that could give me ulcers, it would be listen to them dissect the news, you know. And Paul Harvey, I learned and listened to what he said, that bad news is good news for somebody. And I will feel a little bit more comfortable when I hear those jackrabbits take it apart like a frog in a biology class, you know. I'm sorry to say that I have to give all of you some bad news here tonight. I heard today, much to my chagrin and exasperation, that Jane Fonda is making a trip to Iraq to have an interview with Saddam Hussein and discuss all of the abuses that we gave him while we were in that congregation. But the good news is, Ted Kennedy is going to drive her to the airport. All right. The speeches that I've heard here have been as good or better than those that I listened to on TV in conventions that, in my opinion, were not nearly so important as the one we had here. And the real difference is, contrary to what Paul Harvey said about the ultimate objective of the elected politician serving us and his definition of what that meant, the opposite is true here in this convention. The rainbow leaders that you saw here and who were nominated keep their promises, and I can say with all sincerity that they do well by you and me, every one of them, and that I appreciate too. Tom Hopkins, in my opinion, is a real pro. I frankly was pleasantly surprised. Many of those people I've heard on that circuit cannot find their butts with both hands when it comes to selling anything, really. But that guy was good. And part of the reason is he did his homework extremely well. And I would highly recommend those of you who have that material, and if you don't have it, it should be in every office. And don't take it home and file it, which is what we tend to do with things that we get enthused about. Sometimes I am persuaded that we should buy toilet tissue and get it wet, you know, then we can do something with it. But anyhow, the point is, don't file it, use it. I could take the material that he gave us and hold meetings for the next 6 months, 10 or 15-minute meetings, to help teach what he was talking about and review it. And one of the things I can tell you based on experience is the best way to learn is to teach, whatever it is. He gave us a lot of new ideas to teach the basics. You know, nothing is really new in the world, he said. And that is true about basics. But he gave us words and ideas that can help us do a better job of teaching that. And that's very, very, very important, I think. The breakout meetings were super. And I'm sure that all of you know that I would roller skate all the way from Detroit down here to hear the Fall Guys and the Gal. You know, they are my favorite group. Since I'm closer to the door than he is, I want to say especially the Gal. All right? Anyway, she is wonderful. Kurt's speech today I thought was the best one I have ever heard him make. And seriously, he did extremely good today. I hate to tell you, though, Kurt, when you were talking about how much money you were making, $77 a minute, I think it was, and you were going to be the highest paid speaker, I got to tell you that a girl came up to me and offered me $1,000 if I wouldn't talk at all. So I was sorely tempted to take that because we've had quite an affair here, and I worry about the thing being too big. One time there was a preacher down in a little town called Sargo, Kentucky, near where I was raised, that spent 2 weeks preparing a very fantastic sermon. And on this particular Sunday morning when he went to church, only one old farmer showed up, and he didn't know what to do. All this work, one guy shows up, so he just goes and asks the old farmer. He said, Captain, he said, I've spent 2 weeks preparing this sermon, and you're the only one here. What should I do? The old farmer looked at him. He says, well, if I loaded up a wagon full of hay and I went out in the field to feed the cows, and only one cow showed up, I would feed that cow. So that old preacher took that as license. He got back up in the pulpit, and he gave this old farmer both barrels. Didn't miss nothing. When it was over with, the old farmer came up, and he said, Reverend, you must have misunderstood what I said. What I said was that if I loaded a wagon and went to the field, and only one cow showed up, I would feed the cow. I did not say that I would dump the whole damn load, okay? Now, I'm afraid that's happened to you here, okay? And I don't want to do that. I want to do a good job desperately. And my worry is that you've already had enough. I even considered passing out Tylenol to everybody to relieve your butt a little bit, you know, because you've been sitting so long. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you for a few minutes about some things that have not been included in your agenda. To be candid with you, I was a little bit worried when I was trying to think about what am I going to talk about tonight that makes any sense at all. After you have been subjected to 3 days of all kinds of good people and technique, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how in the hell am I going to come up with anything that will make any sense or be interesting to you? And I want to start out and tell you that I'm going to talk about my own experiences about something that you have never heard, because I am getting older. I know that I've told some of you the story about an old farmer back home that raised Leghorn chickens. Now, in case you don't know what that is, you know, Leghorn chickens were considered the best layers of eggs of all the breeds of chickens. And that's what he was raising because he was selling eggs as his money crop. And they had hybrid roosters to breed the hens. You may or may not know it, but chickens don't lay eggs if they don't get bred like everybody else. Anyway, you got to think about that a little bit. Now, anyway, the point that I was going to make to you is that this old rooster he had was getting along in years. And he decided he was going to get another young hybrid rooster with more vigor and all of that. So when the young rooster got on the farm, he went to the old rooster and he said, Daddy, he said, you've had it. You might as well go lay down somewhere and die. I'm taking over the brood. The old rooster said, I can understand that. But he said, I wonder if you'd let me bow out with just a little bit of dignity. Young rooster says, what do you mean by that? He says, let's just have a foot race. You know you can beat me. I'm half crippled, you know, got arthritis. Young rooster said, that seems okay to me. The old rooster said, look, how about give me just a little head start? He says, let's start here at this end of the barn, go round the barn, in front, down past the house to the road. And let me have a head start from this end to the other end of the barn. Young rooster said, fine. He said, you can catch him in 2 minutes. 1, 2, 3, off they go. The young old rooster goes around the barn, and the young rooster's right behind him running like crazy. They get down by the house, and the old rooster starts squawking and flapping and carrying on, and Grandpappy's sitting on the porch watching all of this. Here comes the young rooster. The old rooster just a little bit in front of him. Grandpappy reaches back and gets the gun, and he blows that young rooster all to smithereens. Grandma comes out of the house and says, Pappy, what's going on? He said, that is the second queer rooster I've got on this farm this week. Yeah. Now, I am no spring chicken, to be sure. But I'm not an old rooster either, I'll tell you. I want to talk to you, though, about growing older, because that's something you've never heard me say. Not in the normal sense. But I want to say to you that as one grows older, you become more concerned with a book of experience than with a book of theory. You tend to concentrate and be guided by what you know, as opposed to what somebody else may think. The years, I have learned, teach much, which the weeks and the months never know. That doesn't have anything to do with brains. As you get older, you learn that everybody wants to make progress, but nobody wants to change. Peculiarity of human nature. They want it better, but they want to keep it like it is, which is somewhat of a conflict to say the least. First time I ever heard this, I heard it from Steve. He said, if you keep on doing what you always done, you're going to keep on getting what you always got. Now, he probably stole that from somebody else here, but anyway, it made good sense to me. No progress, no change means no progress. As you get older, you learn to boast a little bit less about what you have done and boost others a little bit more. And you find out that it's better. You think of the real worth of people and less about what's wrong with them. You learn that snobbishness and egos that are gone amok is really, truly inferiority turned upside down. And that kindly consideration of others is really the only aristocracy that is worth envy or imitation. And it takes a long time for you to learn that. And I can remember when I didn't know it. You come to know as you get older that the greatest reward that a person can win is the respect, the understanding, the affection of his fellow men and women. And finally, you learn that age is really nothing but a state of mind, that some people who are 40 act like they're 80, and I know a man who is 78 years old in Fresno, California, that just married a 40-year-old girl and he's looking for a new home near a school. Now, how about that, okay? The skin wrinkles, but the heart doesn't. I hope to live to be 101 and then get killed by gunshot wounds from the gun of a jealous husband. All right. The theme of this meeting, as we all know, is Reach for the Stars. Frankly, that is my philosophy, my own ideas, and something that has guided me for many years. A long, long time ago, we started the Total program along with another idea and an ideal called the Pace Setters. The purpose of that get-together and all of the planning and money that we spent then and since has had as its main reason for being to develop 100 distributors who can be all-stars, to sell 300 machines a month or more. And when we began that, we only had one distributor that was selling 200 a month. And today we have 53 distributors who are at that level or more, or they're beating at the back door of it. And I am very, very proud of that. The next thing we got into was superstars, which was distributors who could do 600 a month average. And we have 23 distributors who are in that category. That's pretty good, Kurt. I'm trying to come up with the next name, which is a 1,000 a month, and I think the best thing I can come up with is guiding stars, because if they can do that, they'll teach the rest of us how to do it. You follow me? And so I believe in the idea of reaching for the stars, and I earnestly want Rainbow to be better for everybody that's in it. I'm too far along for it to do me any good economically, and I don't work for money anymore anyway. But I want to see you do good. As I talk to the Harringtons who are going out to Arizona to open up, I have no pride in any achievement in this business that doesn't produce money and happiness and a sense of well-being for all of you. It doesn't mean a thing to me if that doesn't happen. Having your picture on the front of the magazine, you can't get a loaf of bread with that. All that long green stuff and all that dead people's pictures on it is what we're after here, children, you know, if you don't know that already. And I want to see that happen. And what I'm talking to you about are suggestions as to how you can encourage that possibility and help you make a stronger and longer reach for the stars. I learned that success and happiness and peace of mind, plus reasonable respect for the person you see in the mirror every day, requires a great many skills. Many of them you have heard about in this convention, how to sell the product, which is easy. This machine is almost like having license to steal. I sometimes feel bad about taking the money because it was so easy to get it. And I'm serious about that. I wish they would struggle a little more, if you know what I mean. It'd make me feel better. You must develop proficiency in the plans that we have, the sales plans and the strategies, how to talent scout, how to get support from owners and non-owners and leads, and how to register every once in a while in a pinch, how to motivate other people, get goals daily and weekly and monthly for yourself. Knowing what you want is the first step to getting it, by the way. I learned that a long time ago. Get a working knowledge of money management. As Paul Vidovich said in the meeting that we had in Florida, teach your money where to go. Don't wonder where it went. And that happens to a hell of a lot of us. I learned a long time ago that a person that doesn't save money is headed for trouble. Sooner or later, it's going to get them in one form or another. And they wind up with an explosion, and they're back to first base. How to control your time every day, because time is the vehicle which carries your talents to market. And you have to learn that, and it took me a while to learn it. This to mention just a few of the skills. The people here have and can teach you that better than I can. But I've also learned another thing. If you are going to develop your business skills, which in Rainbow isn't difficult, we have to add another one, and this is the one I want to talk to you about for a minute. Another proficiency, which may be more vital and more important and more critical than all of the rest of the things that you study and learn. If you're to get from life, and especially in Rainbow, what it can give you. The skill of which I make reference, the one which we must work diligently to perfect, the one without which all others can be compromised, short-circuited, sidetracked, reduced in value. The thing that I'm talking about is people skill, managing people and helping other people. Rainbow, as we all know, and it was said by everybody on the dais up here, is a people business. And there are two kinds of people that you have to learn how to look after and manage and cope with. The first kind is the person that you see in the mirror every day. Yourself. And that one, by the way, without question, based on my years of experience, is the most difficult dude to handle. The second group is everybody else, your associates, your friends, your neighbors, and your family, etc. A little boy that I knew once, who had an inquisitive nature, went to his mama, and he said, "Mama," because Mama did everything for him, says, "What is Daddy here for anyway?" And she thought about it for a minute, and she said, "Well, Daddy is here to help others." He said, "How about Grandfather?" He's here to help others too. He said, "Well, how about Grandma?" "Well, she's here to help others too." And finally he says, "Well, Mama, what am I here for?" And she says, "Willie, you're here to help others too." And he thought about that for a little while, and he said, "Mama, what are the others here for?" You know, sometimes I wonder about that. I don't know about you. The point is that we're here to help others as well as ourselves. And the others will help us if we learn how to manage and cope with the frailties that lie with first in ourselves and then in everyone else that you will ever know in your life. Every one of them are full of holes. They got weaknesses up to their kazoo, the same as you have. And if you don't understand and learn how to cope and handle that, you will never have the same kind of happiness and success that you do if you do. The thrust of what I'm saying is, if you are to obtain or maintain a successful, happy position, it is your disposition which counts a bunch, more than anything else you know. If you don't have that, flush the rest of it down the toilet. You may or may not be aware that it's a biological fact that everybody in this room possesses the same basic makeup as a jackass, a mule. Same vertebrae, kidneys, lungs, heart, stomach, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, teeth. All of the same thing that a jackass has is what you and I got. The basic difference between us and that donkey is our ability to think. And I've learned that a reasonable majority of the people that I know do not use their thinking ability efficiently in the vein that I'm talking to you about. And therefore, they trot around the world acting like a jackass of one size or another all the time. Really true. Some big ones and some little ones, to be sure. And that group, by the way, on occasion, has included me. sometimes more than on occasion, Kurt. And I'm sure it has included at least one or two of you. Now, we're not going to have a vote about who it is right now because everyone would lose. But anyway, that's the point. Back in 1952, Steve was talking about in Richmond, a boy came down to visit me by the name of Perry from Providence, Rhode Island. We had just won the King's Crown. We had 530 people in that meeting in the Jefferson Hotel in Richmond, which was the only hotel that was big enough to hold us down there. And basically, because we were doing well, we were pretty happy campers. And Perry said, "Sandy, how do you get along so well with all of these many people?" I thought about that for a minute, and I said, "Perry, I've got to be honest here. The guy that gives me the most trouble is the one that I shave every day. And when I can get Sandy to do what he's supposed to do and do it right, I don't have any trouble with anybody else, much, very little." The point here is that most of our wounds in life, I have learned as I get older, are self-inflicted. It isn't what somebody else does to it, it's what we do to ourselves that messes us up. In my reading of biographies and the unique chance in my job that I've had to observe many thousands of people, I have learned this, that people who are the most powerful are the ones who have power over themselves, not somebody else who may have a lot of book learning. And in Rainbow, they are the ones who do well. When you can get a measure of control over your emotions and your actions and do what you know is right, keep your head, as Kipling's poem said, when everybody else is losing theirs, and don't shoot from the hip. Do what you do with careful, deliberate thought, not quick emotional decisions where reactions are generally wrong. Be slow to anger. Then you have power that makes everything else you have an ability worthwhile and worth a lot more. My brother, Tommy, is 3 years younger than me, and he was the big potentate of the Masonic Lodge in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is something akin to being President of the United States, at least in Owensboro anyway. And a guy Tommy was telling me about became a Mason when he was 23, and he took what they called his first degree. There are 32 degrees in the Masonic Lodge. 50-some years later, when he was 73 years old, he applied to take his second degree. And Tommy said, "Willie, why has it taken you so long to apply for your second degree?" And Willie said, "Tommy, when I took my first degree 53 years ago, they told me that I could not take my second degree until I had learned to control my passions." And he said, "I'm just now getting around to it." Now, I'm not going to plead guilty to that if you don't care. The point is, before we can influence others, we have to work to get control of our passions and our emotions and our judgment and learning how to keep our cool, of the person whose underwear we put on every morning. Of course, we have to believe in ourselves, but in dealing with others, I give you another thought that I have learned: humility. In dealing with other people, to be humble has a high place and a high priority. Tom Hopkins said, "Be humble, don't be a braggart." Old man Morgan, who was one of my mentors many years ago, used to say, "Sandy, have more than you show and say less than you know." Pretty good advice. Another way of saying, be a little humble. You don't have to be a pop-off and a braggart and all that kind of stuff. Humbleness, I have learned, carries a big stick in controlling egos that most of the time destroy people's possibilities. I admit, and you have to admit, that you're not the sweetest smelling geranium that ever came down the pike. Don't have too much love of self and be too overly proud of your exploits. It's a sure sign of doubt and weakness. One of my greatest frustrations is I have a fella who seems to need to wear his uniform of medals every time I get around him. He reminds me of General MacArthur. He's got them all the way down to his zipper. Okay? Everything he's ever won, he's got tied to him in one form or another. and he psychoanalyzes everything everybody says or everything that happens. What a frustration it is to me. That man could be a giant if he could just turn that ego loose and get rid of all that crap and false pride. Reminds me of a guy I went to high school with that I worshiped. His name was Jack Mitchell. He was a big, handsome dude, and he played linebacker on our football team. He was president of the class, and I used to think, oh, God, if I could look like that guy, you know, and play football like him, I could get every girl in high school. Here I was, I didn't weigh 100 pounds soaking wet, and I looked like somebody had been whipping me with an ugly stick, you know what I mean? This guy was handsome. On the last play of the game against Henderson, Kentucky, who was our arch rivals on Thanksgiving Day, the year we were all seniors, Jack Mitchell caught a pass behind the goal line and ran 109 yards for a touchdown. After that, he never did another damn thing that was worthwhile. All he wanted to do was brag about that 109-yard touchdown, and he died as a drunk, and his wife killed him because of abuse. And he was my hero, but he couldn't handle his ego. It killed him, and it does that to a great many of us. Humility, children, is a sign of strength, not weakness. To have self-assurance is evidence of an ego that is under control. Another loose horse, by the way, I have learned is high sensitivity, and it's closely allied to egotism. Whatever the other person's motive may have been, if you were insulted or slighted or shortchanged, don't be persuaded by somebody else's folly. It is best punished by neglect. If you keep fanning it, it only smells bad, and the odor rubs off on you half the time. Another thing I've learned, some of the bitterest conflicts in families, neighbors, and people in business have been waged, not for great ideas or principles, but over small, petty differences. When examined in the light of mourning, they were meaningless trivialities. Didn't amount to a damn, at least when the thing began. A sarcastic word, a snarling letter, an offhand remark, a slight, or some form are the small sparks that lead to great conflagrations. Neighbors quit speaking, families become alienated, friends part, and businesses go to hell in the little red wagon. Over what? In the light of truth, nothing, really. It isn't the big things in life that you have trouble with, it's the little things. You might be interested in knowing that your company spends well over $1 million a year in time and travel trying to put out fires of little CS, and if you don't know what that means, I'll tell you later. Egos, helping to resolve petty clashes and differences in people. We spend almost as much time putting that oil on the water as we do trying to light the fires of inspiration to get people to strive to get to loftier plateaus. That's sad, but very true. It has been said that a person is only as big as what it takes to make them mad. An old school teacher of mine said it to me in another way: it takes a big man to deal with small problems and not himself grow small. And that is true. The wisdom, by the way, in handling misunderstandings, I've learned consists in this: focus your brain on defining what the hell the problem is. Many far-reaching disputes could cease in a minute if one part or the other of that would put into a real few words what they understand the trouble is. You see, they don't. But get it defined and talk about it. You can solve it most of the time. Many a mountain of misunderstanding is reduced to a bump in the road if you use that weapon. 2, develop the ignoring habit. Oh, was this ever hard for me to do? I used to throw up 4 or 5 times before I could get around to it. Clara Barton, who was a woman, who was a wonderful gal, the founder of the American Red Cross, once was asked by a friend whether she remembered a cruel thing that was done to her years before. Her answer was, no. I distinctly remember forgetting about it. Pretty good advice. Anyway, I got on the elevator once with them, and I'm trying to be a smart dude, you see, and I say to this little girl, I'll bet you have a lot of ups and downs on this job, don't you? And she said, yes, and I have quite a few jerks, too. That little girl was right, of course, and I was one of the jerks. TV program says you got to kiss a lot of frogs before you get to the prince. Remember this, that it takes some rain to make a rainbow, not the sun, okay? Someone whose name eludes me once defined life as constant adjustment of internal feelings to cope with external conditions. And that's pretty good. Compromise is necessary in every facet of life. And that's the only way that you can make a longer reach for the stars. Just use common sense to see the best in other people and have the courage to live with their shortcomings. And most of all, strive to do a better job on the golden rule yourself. Get your own house in order before you start raising hell about how somebody else's looks. Sooner or later, you're going to learn that life is a mixture of good and bad. It's victory and defeat, give and take. That a person who loses his or her temper almost always loses. That if you carry a chip on your shoulder, it's a hell of a good way to get it knocked off by somebody. That's happened to me a lot of times. My teeth had to be put together. I've had wires all over myself. A lot of other people have ambitions and brains that are just as good or better than yours. And that hard work and not cleverness is the secret to success. Okay? When you walk through the forest, remember that it's not them big old trees that tear you up. It's the vines and the roots and the underbrush. The little things that obscure and draw the blind over the window of your mind, and you lose sight of where you're trying to go. And that's happened to me a million times. It requires, by the way, a different kind of courage to get after those little obstacles than it does for a soldier to go get killed. But it's just as great a courage nonetheless. The kind of courage that is a measure of the great, keeps a person pleasant in the daily grind and casting off pettiness and overlooking small insults, meeting irksome tasks with a smile. Ben-Hur, have you ever heard of him? Fantastic man. Stood up with gusto under the lash of the galley master, bending to the oar as were he on a pleasure cruise. He would not let menial tribulations and abuse cut him loose from his dream, which was the rescue of the Tribune. Nothing little would keep that man from doing something big. He was reaching for the stars. Julius Caesar, one of the most active men of his time, a fantastic general and one of the greatest statements the world has ever produced. He had a fantastic impact on history. Julius Caesar was an epileptic, and he had seizures all day, all the time. That stumbling block did not keep him from doing worthwhile things. Have you ever read Treasure Island? Super book. I've read that thing a million times, and I still watch it on TV. Have you ever read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I read that when I was in about the 7th or 8th grade. Very fascinating book. The fellow who wrote both of those was Robert Louis Stevenson. He had uncurable tuberculosis back in those days, and he wrote almost everything in bed. Never could get up. Booker T. Washington was a black man, a Negro, and he was as poor as Job's turkey. And yet, that man became the most significant man of his race. Thomas A. Edison, by the way, was deaf. He learned telegraphy and was the world's greatest inventor. Henry Ford loved him, and he took Edison's house from Ohio and moved it to Detroit. It's in Greenfield Village, if you ever get up there and have a chance to see it. All of these guys had reasons to go to the Wailing Wall, but somehow or another, they never had time to do it. There are spots in the road of achievement which are welcome resting places to the gal or guy who looks for an excuse, who doesn't want to reach for the stars. It's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet, it's too dry, the business conditions are lousy, it's hard to get good men or women, the economy is horrible, Joe Blow, my supervisor, did this or that to me, and I don't feel well, and on and on and on and on, or reasons not to do it. I'm a frustrated farmer. I don't know if you've ever watched cows and horses or mules. They don't get upset when a storm comes. They just turn their butts to it and ride it out. And that's a good way to do it. Pretty soon it'll go away. Have you ever heard the song Dry Bones? Head bone's connected to the neck bone. I like it. I like the rhythm in that thing. You know, I want to get up and dance a little. Every time I hear it, I'm reminded that it takes a lot of bones to make up the human anatomy, but it takes some to make up the mental and as well as physical. And three of these bones that we need is to help our mental situation is a funny bone, a wishbone, and a backbone. The funny bone is for enjoying a good laugh every now and then, even if you're the victim. I have learned that people that I want to be around have a sense of humor. The guy that looks like he's got Limburger cheese in his mustache and pickle in his oatmeal, I don't want too much to do with him. Henry Ward Beecher once said, "A man without mirth is like a wagon without any springs. It's jolted by every blessed pebble in the road." Laughter is the sunshine of the soul and the best medicine that you can ever take for a long life. If you laugh, you can last. The wishbone is for dreaming about big things, which is what we're doing here, reaching for the stars. Seeing your situation not as it is now, but as you'd like to be, and visualizing yourself as the person you want to be. That harnesses your heart to the everyday task and that you have to do to make your wishes come true. It helps you reach for the stars. A backbone is for courage. As Tom said yesterday, life has its rhythms, its ebbs and its flows, and one must labor and wait and give time a chance to work the miracles. Funny bone and a wishbone and backbone are the tools that will help take you to the stars and make of you a happy camper. When you're on the right track and helping other people and getting along with other people, life is more fun and success is easier. Goethe, who was a famous philosopher, said if each of us would sweep in front of our own doors, then the world would be clean. I guess you can see that I have directed most of my admonitions to you tonight in the main on suggesting ideas and thoughts and philosophies to develop the skill of managing yourself, because that is the toughest thing you will ever have as a chore, believe me. A couple of things to do to help you get along with other people is to learn to be tolerant and look for the good. One of the most important lessons I've learned in my 69 years is that most of the work in this world is done by people who are imperfect. Sign on a restroom wall in the Denver airport. I was in there once waiting to change planes, and somebody scribbled on the wall, Will Rogers said he never met a man he didn't like. Some fellow with a sense of humor wrote underneath, I have a wife with the same characteristics. That fella is going to be okay. Be tolerant of characteristics of others which irritate you. Be tolerant of them. Try to like every person that you see, if you can, because I can tell you it's good for your digestion. Be quick to praise. It's a very valued commodity in society because it's so rare. Nobody does it. Be forgiving, and this is important here. Very tough to do. To make mistakes, somebody said, is human. Ought it not to be also human to forgive people? Forgiveness expressed to another, in my opinion, is a far more powerful tool than punishment. They'll remember you a lot longer for that and love you for it. To carry a grudge is pure, unadulterated stupidity. Vindictiveness, grudges are millstones around your neck, and they detract you from what you may have been if you carry them around. He that cannot forgive destroys the bridge of life over which himself or herself must pass. If reaching for the stars is your aim, then never, in my opinion, does a human being appear taller or so noble as when she forgives and forgets and lets revenge go down the tube. He or she who cannot forgive is weak. Forgiveness is an attribute of the strong. The weak never have it. I hope that you will forgive me if I have offended all of you by preaching to you for a little while. And I do that because I know that frowns and troubles are totally out of place in your eyes that were meant to smile. There is, you know, a way to make your greatest troubles small. And here is the happy secret of it all. Look for the silver lining and the rainbow whenever clouds appear in the sky. Remember that someplace the sun is shining. And so the right thing to do is make it shine for you. Not cover it up with a lot of other crap. Keep a heart full of joy and gladness, because that always banishes sadness and strife. Just look for the silver lining, and there you'll find the sunny side of life. In addition to that, you'll get a saddle on that damn donkey that runs around in you all the time. I appreciate your kind attention. It's been fun being here. And I tell you for sure that this has been good for me. I just hope that I have been a little bit of good for you. I'll be back in November, I promise, to celebrate 5,000 sales in October. Thank you. All right. Very good. Okay, Kurt.